Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko praised U.S. President Donald Trump on his efforts to restore order in the Middle East. These are decisive and positive steps that could lead to the creation of a state, perhaps a unified Palestinian state, that would include the Gaza Strip, and people there would finally be able to live normally, Lukashenko said at a meeting with Belarusian officials on Tuesday. According to Associated Press, Lukashenko said that Belarus is ready to strike a big deal with the US, but our interests must also be taken into account, and everything must be fair, as we once agreed with the Americans, he noted. Lukashenko had another message for Trump, telling the US leader not to be too concerned about not being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He said that, being among these renegades there is probably not appropriate for him, and expressed confidence that, it is more important to evaluate the international community and the people of the world than this politicized structure. Belarus has two Nobel laureates, human rights defender Ales Bialyatsky, who was arrested in and sentenced to 4.5 years in prison, and journalist Svetlana Alexievich, who was forced to leave the country because of political persecution.
Я хотел бы сегодня с вами посоветоваться по ряду вопросов. Я абсолютно поддерживаю эти шаги президента Соединенных Штатов Америки Дональда Трампа по наведению порядка на Ближнем Востоке в данном случае. Шаг решительный, хороший, который, возможно, приведет к созданию государства, может быть, единого палестинского государства, куда войдет и сектор Газа, и, наконец-то, люди получат возможность там нормально жить. В установление мира в мире вообще. Да ничего не сделали, наоборот, способствовали и подталкивали. Мы готовы с ними заключить большую сделку. На одной чаше весов их вопросы, просьбы и требования, на другой чаше весов наши вопросы и требования. Решаем? Давайте будем решать. Мы к этому готовы. Предложение Дональда Трампа в этом плане я абсолютно оцениваю нормально. Но должны быть учтены и наши интересы. И все должно быть честно, как когда-то мы с американцами договаривались. Но если обещана премия Дональду Трампу в будущем году, значит, мы можем рассчитывать на то, что он будет проводить. Я лично бы ему посоветовал особо не переживать, что не присудили эту Нобелевскую премию, потому что быть в ряду этих отщепенцев там, наверное, ему не к месту. Ну, а люди в мире должны оценить то, что делают Соединенные Штаты Америки и их президент на международной арене. Это важнее оценка международного сообщества и людей в мире, нежели вот этой политизированной структуры. Оппозиционерку из Венесуэлы, ничего не имею против, не знаю о ее политике, как и вы, наверное, ничего не знаете. Хвосты какие-то остались. И чергенец, и наши руководители Белавия заявляют, обещанное будут выполнять так же, как по Белавии. Заявили о том, что снимают санкции с Беларуси.
Russian dictator Vladimir Putin justifies the full-scale invasion, among other things, by liberating Russian-speaking regions. In reality, the territories under Russian occupation are subject to mass looting. This is stated in an investigation by Le Figaro. Russian occupation forces have confiscated, or in fact seized, at least 25,000 residential properties in Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. This campaign has been ongoing since 2014. Under the guise of ownerless property, Moscow is seizing houses and apartments belonging to Ukrainians who are not listed in Russian registries. In reality, this amounts to a systematic expropriation of other people's property. The largest number of cases were recorded in Mariupol. At least 13,000 apartments and houses fell under the control of Russian occupiers. Back in March, the BBC reported that more than 5,700 properties had lost their rightful owners as a result of Russian aggression. Large-scale confiscations are also taking place in other towns and villages. In Ernagoda, where most residents fled the occupation, their homes have been occupied by Russian forces. In Donetsk, apartments in central districts are being confiscated. In the mining towns of Bryanka near Luhansk, which has become a military logistics hub for the Russian armed forces, the authorities plan to seize approximately 400 apartments in old Soviet-era buildings. In the resort town of Kyrilivka, in the Zaporizhia region, not only houses but also hotels, restaurants and sanatoriums, at least 70 properties, have been confiscated. In most cases, housing is transferred to Russian military personnel, intelligence officers and government officials. Furthermore, as a reward for their participation in the aggression against Ukraine, veterans of the so-called SVO receive land plots and apartments. In Crimea, according to official data, approximately 2,500 such individuals have already become owners of land by the sea. If the houses aren't occupied by security forces or officials, they are sold at auction. According to Gunala Inizan, a researcher at Lumiere Lyon 2 University, the main goal of the confiscation is to enrich the state. In the first 6 months of 2025 alone, the Kremlin earned over 24 million euros from the nationalization of Ukrainian property in occupied Crimea. The confiscation system is also used to impose Russian citizenship. Since October 2023, proof of housing rights can only be obtained with a Russian passport. In March 2025, Moscow announced the issuance of 3.5 million Russian documents in the so-called new regions. This policy, as Le Figaro notes, not only legitimizes the seizure of other people's property, but also complicates the process of future deoccupation. Imagine that liberation does happen. I walk into my house, open the door, and see Russians there claiming they paid, took out a loan, and now this is their home. What will happen next? Said Vera Yastrebova, director of the Ukrainian human rights organization Eastern Human Rights Group, whose home in Debaltsev was seized by Russian troops. The mass confiscation of Ukrainian property demonstrates the Kremlin's true goals, not the protection of the Russian world, but the legalized plunder of territory and the destruction of the property rights of Ukrainian citizens. What is currently happening in the occupied territories is causing discontent and even rebellion among the local population against Moscow. It is not excluded that the wave of rebellion will grow further